Okay, it is Wednesday, August 2nd. Believe it or not, it is August. It is almost September. It's almost December already. I mean, we're in the heat of summer. It's 98 degrees on my watch. It's been hot. But I understand from Robert Mays at Texas State University, who's a water expert, that we are exiting La Nina and entering El Nino. And that means wetter winter and fall and not as much dryness. So crossing my fingers for water and all that and what comes with it. And we have a great guest today. We'll get to him in a moment. Before we get rolling, I want to ask our own John Sibley Butler for some music.
If I could save time in a bottle, first thing that I like to do, save every day like a treasure, and then again I was spending with you. But there never seems to be enough time. Do the things you want to do once you find them. I've looked around enough to know you're the one I want to go through time with.
I can't hear you, Dennis.
All right. Yeah, I was saying that it's always a pleasure to start to watch hear Johnny play. He's amazing. So anyway, John Butler, how is everything in your neck of the woods?
It's hot in my neck of the woods. It is very, very hot, but the work goes on. The work goes on with building the structures to, help Texas to be very, very competitive in the future. Bringing companies to America that's doing great things, bringing them to Texas that's doing great things. And it looks like the stock market is somewhere between I really want to and maybe not with everything that's happening. So it's amazing how, the heat has replaced what's going on in Europe and the war over there as the major story, in America. But the big thing is, how do we secure jobs for the future? Andreas, everyone is calling me about AI. What would the impact be? And I always say, well, if it kills 10 jobs, it'll create 50 more. So we can think about, for example, the basketball. So when Naismith created basketball, which Kansas could do so well, there was one guy you would shoot the ball in the basket, and the guy had to take the ball out the basket, right?
Right.
Well, when they put nets there, the guy was taking the ball out the basket, said, "What will I do? My job is gone now." So technology is sort of like that. I think new jobs are being created almost every day. And the other great thing is the movement of populations around, not just in America, but around the globe for economic security. I think what we've learned in this century is that market economies have done very, very well. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfect. But we've learned that the Soviet Union tried communism for 60 years and failed miserably. There have been other kinds of economies that have failed. China took market economies and put it on top of communism and took off in a different kind of way. So we're always in that same kind of issue of, where will the new jobs come from? How do we maintain the greatness of our cities? How do we create the infrastructure for our cities in the future so that people can have continued prosperity and in all cases uplift everybody that we can?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to have our guest today, Steve Adler. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
The honorable former mayor of the city of Austin with a phenomenal trajectory. He's actually, as you know, John, he's a Longhorn. But before being a Longhorn, he's a Princeton grad. So he has that East Coast Texas thing going for him. And he's been out now for a few months. And so Steve, you have a phenomenal career as a lawyer and civil servant and all kinds of boards, from Ballet Austin to Texas Tribune to the Long Center to all kinds of things. What's going on in the former mayor's life? What's the plan? Are you doing anything fun?
Everything I'm doing is pretty fun now. It's all relative, right? It's no one's calling me up in the middle of the night and not a lot of tweets about me. But I'll be teaching in the fall here in another month. Class starts at St. Ed's.
Oh, wow.
And then I'll be teaching as part of the LBJ School Executive Master's Program in the next spring, summer next year. I'm writing a book, and that's fun to do. But a lot of the last 6 months has been an apology tour with my wife and my daughters, kind of reacquainting myself and making sure I'm part of all the birthday celebrations of the grandkids.
There you go.
Well, Steve, welcome to my world of a professor writing books and writing articles. And I think you have a lot to write about. Let me just ask you as we get going here. When you look at the lessons, you were mayor of one of the greatest cities in this era, as measured by jobs, opportunity, people coming here, recreation, and let's not forget beauty. Absolute gorgeous cities. So when you sit down and think about if you were to put an outline for a book on my life living in Austin as a lawyer and living in Austin as mayor, and then you see the changes that's happened to the city, which was brought about opportunity structures, and Southwest going from a little bitty thing that was created to bring revenue to bars with bands, to a big conference on intellect, on technology, and et cetera. So how would you begin to outline and think about such a book?
Well, Austin certainly has changed a lot. I got here in the late 70s and was passing through town as a law student. No intention of staying. But like so many people, once I got here, I got caught up in the breakfast tacos and the music and the culture, Barton Springs and the lake, and just stayed. When I think about all the changes, and they've been considerable, because the city obviously has been one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing city during much of that time. The things that attracted me to Austin and kept me here have remained the same. I think that there's a certain kind of person who self-selects to live in this city. And I think that there's kind of an innovative, creative, entrepreneurial ethos here. Now, having served as mayor and been around the world in lots and lots of cities, I'm convinced that there is no city on the planet that has a higher tolerance for taking risks than Austin has. And I think that leads to innovation. In a lot of cities, if you try something and you fail, you get punished. You don't get back to the same capitol table. You don't get invited back into the same rooms. But in this city, some of the civic folk heroes are the people that tried something and didn't quite work out, and they had to iterate and come back. This city lives the truism that you should fail quickly and learn. But I think that means it's a welcoming city, welcoming different people, different ideas. And I think that drives innovation. I think that's the reason why there are more startups per capita in this city than any other place in the world. So I can point to changes. I can remember in the 70s and 80s, things closing down, and everyone lamenting the fact that Austin would never be the same again. Heck, I can remember when the hole in the wall opened up, and it was controversial. What is this new place on the drag, interfering with what we all know and celebrate? And of course, now it's, you can't imagine Austin without the hole in the wall.
Yeah.
But Austin, I think, does change well.
So
I got here in '74 from Northwestern, and like you, I've seen it change. And I think one of the things that has happened is that what we call that partnership between industry, government, and science, or let's call it academia, what Andrea does so well. And if we look to the future and keeping that dynamics together, and when I say that, I think that science and technology creates jobs, and business processes keep those jobs going and create wealth. I wonder aloud, what would be the new science and technology? That's my first question. What do you think going forward? And the other question is an obvious one. How do we get the lessons of this city to other cities in America?
In terms of the future technologies, I think it's going to be making sure that we're accumulating all the data we can to learn from, and then being able to handle massive quantities of data in a way that improve the quality of life of people. Obviously, AI is going to have a real significant role in that. But in our city, I think our contribution is not only going to be leading in that kind of technology, but the integration of that technology with application. I mean, this is a city where good ideas go to become real. And I think that's our place in this city. And we have a unique symbiotic relationship with the university, and hopefully a growing number of universities you see. But together with the city, and the county now is leaning forward in new ways. State government always a real backbone of that. And I think we do that well, John, but you're one of the architects of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been real successful here. And I think that's going to be a lot of what we add.
So I think with Cosmesket was playing, and Laura Kilcrease and others, and I think we did a good platform to really strive in where we are now and going forward. We call it Austin 3.0 now, but always we need great mayors like you to continue to lead us forward. And the entrepreneurship startup side. I remember when your daughter was getting in the startup tradition, and we talked at your place, and I was playing the piano at your place, and we were talking about the importance of startups. And you said, yeah, they're very, very interesting. And my daughter is now part of that community, and let's make sure that she continues to strive. So you're exactly right. We set a platform, but it took great people like you to continue that platform. And we never went backwards here when it came to business enterprise. You've got Tesla here, you got other kind of great platforms here and other comers. Yes.
So Steve, real quick, walk us through the journey of you run for mayor, you make a decision to run for mayor. You had an expectation of perhaps what you could accomplish if you got elected. And I am sure that over time that sort of changed dramatically. Maybe you are, beyond your expectations of what took place and how it all happened. But give us a good glimpse of Steve Adler 8-9 years ago, Steve Adler today, that journey of enabling, leading, herding cats, connecting dots. That whole journey.
I'll tell you, 9-10 years ago, I had never even thought about being mayor or running for mayor. In fact, probably 30 days before I actually filed for mayor, Diane and I had never had a conversation about doing this. But if you recall that time, pretty critical time for the city. It was just beginning everything was in place for the city to be able to take off if it was further nurtured. But we had also voted to change the form of government. We had gone from an at-large system to a district system. And the research that I saw indicated that 90% of jurisdictions that did that fail in the first 4 to 6 years.
Oh wow.
because it quickly devolves into a ward politic type situation. You know, somebody, a district elects somebody, they've never had representation on the council, and finally they can get that one thing they've been trying to get for 30 years. And every district has one of those things. None of those things are in the best interest perhaps of the whole city to get done. But real quickly, this new council from the districts learns that if 6 of them get together, they can all take home back to their district that thing, whatever that thing was. And you saw that in San Antonio and in other jurisdictions that went through that transformation. So there was a group of us that said, hey, you know, everybody at council virtually is going to be new. We need a mayor that is also new, so that there's no one sitting at the table saying, hey, let me tell you how we do this. And we went out, there were some people that could have run for mayor that would have made great mayors. We all said no. So finally we locked ourselves in the room and said, all right, somebody has to stop what they're doing and go run for mayor. And Diane and I drew the short straw. And 30 days later, we were running for mayor. And surprise, surprise, got elected. But you know, there were real clear needs in this city. We had infrastructure needs, most from, you know, remarkably in transportation. This was a city that for a long time had the express policy of not building infrastructure in hopes that people would stop coming to Austin. That's a policy that doesn't work. You don't build the infrastructure, people are still going to come for all the reasons that people have come for the last 150 years. And by the way, the rate of growth in this metropolitan area has been constant for 150 years. It's not like it's accelerated in the last 25. It's been doubling the population every 20 to 25 years since the 1850s. But anyhow, so people keep coming. We don't have the infrastructure. So a big part, and what I ran on primarily was, one, making a council work and not devolving into ward politics, because everything we did was going to be setting up a new system. Second, it was a real focus on infrastructure, primarily transportation, but just not that. You know, coming up and adopting a 100-year water plan in the city, moving forward with new technologies, figuring out what our place was in smart city evolution and the Internet of Things, and how to maximize quality of life, and then spending a real focus on equity and making sure that the opportunities were open to everybody to be able to compete on the same kind of plane. You know, you put the show talking about water, and then we need the rain. And John started talking about new technologies for solving problems. The very first problem that I addressed in the city, if you recall, back in early 2015, there was record droughts back then. Right? We've seen droughts of this kind since 2015. And I came in to be mayor, and then suddenly people were shopping, you know, many billion-dollar deals for piping in water from East Texas aquifers into the city. We were desperate. I think the lake was down to like a third full. So one of the first things I did as mayor is I made it rain in April, and in one weekend filled up Lake Travis.
I remember that. I remember that.
If I had known all that I was going to be criticized for, that I had no control over, I would have taken a lot more credit for making that rain happen.
That's right. That's right.
You know, one of the interesting things we look, Steve, when you look at infrastructure, Austin was so beautiful. Of course, you know, we had to kind of look at Save Our Springs and the beauty of Austin. For example, when Loop 360 was put in, I mean, it has red lights on it because nobody wanted to cut into the beauty of Austin. And then when we tried to go underneath the ground, there are caves all under the ground, which was also true in the 1800s. So the infrastructure, putting in a beautiful city, you know, like an Austin or a hilly city, like a San Francisco even. So we have our own unique kind of issues underground in Austin. I'm not sure if a lot of people know about the cave structure that we have in Austin that might affect how we do traffic and trains. But more importantly, I can remember those early days. I mean, how do you create a great city and continue to grow when you have all of this beauty? remember that at that time, Andreas, before you got here, Austin stopped at Far West Boulevard,
Mhm.
right there, and there was no loop. There was no loop 360. There was no bridge. I can
Right.
remember going with a friend of mine, David, who was building houses in Great Hills, and he said, nobody would ever live out here. Or that's where Austin Country Club is now,
Mhm.
right? Because you couldn't get to it. So, man, I was wondering, going forward, did you ever do any studies on the underneath of Austin? Do we have any studies that look at the soil structure and the cave structure that might be unique to Austin that we haven't really talked about recently?
You know, obviously the caves in this city and some of the endangered species in this city, and you know, there are all kinds of things that seem to step up as barriers. You know, the aquifer issues in west and then southwest. I mean, they're all issues. And I think it's really important for this city to watchdog those. That said, there are more places where there are not caves than there are caves. And then there are still projects being done and deep digs that are happening downtown. Heck, we ran into a tar pit with one of those buildings, one of the first big buildings to go up at Congress and first. You know, the you find a way. You know, I think that we're seeing now that Loop 360 is going to have the continuous lanes that are built at the intersection, so that, you know, you don't have stoplights on 360, so the cars can continue to move through. I think that as technologies get better, there are design solutions that can help address issues. And I've always supported really prudent technologies as solutions to some of these challenges that exist, so long as you're confident in their ability and there's sufficient safeguards. But this is a city that will have more expensive development in certain parts of our city because of that
Mhm.
issue.
You know,
So Steve, real quick, Steve, walk us through your favorite highlights. There are many, but some are perhaps more interesting than others, like the expansion of Samsung, I think, just after you got elected, perhaps. And what are some of the key highlights? Obviously, Tesla recently, but walk us through some of you think are some of the most interesting, or maybe they were, you know, hours and hours of negotiation or discussion at council, or what are any of those good highlights?
Well, you know, I'm real excited that not only the new companies that are coming to Austin are expanding in Austin, but the kind of companies they are. You know, what this city always needed and still needs is clean manufacturing. Manufacturing plants that can employ a lot of people, employ people at jobs that are paying a living wage or in excess of a living wage. Jobs where people have the opportunity to be able to advance in jobs that are clean, that don't put our environment at risk. And we wanted those kind of companies to come here. When I was running for office back in 2015, the word incentive was a bad word. I mean, nobody stood up and said that word out loud. And when I ran in 2015, I ran on the proposition that another word for investment is incentives is co-investment. I mean, we were paying money to Workforce Commission in order to train people for jobs because, you know, we had a lot of people working at the upper end. We had a lot of people working at the surface levels, but in the skilled labor place, we just didn't have jobs for people in the city that could take those jobs. And we pay those agencies to train people for those jobs. I've always believed that co-investing with a company that's coming into town to help underwrite beginning salaries for people that will be trained in those companies for those jobs by those companies is one of the best ways to ensure the companies come and the jobs are there and people actually get trained for something that they'll do when they graduate. So what we did is we changed the incentive program was to tie it a lot more to community values that we would be investing in otherwise. And I'm excited to see how that moves forward. But there are a lot of things, Andrews, that I think were exciting. I can remember in early 2015 going to a smart city expo in Washington, D.C. I remember it in part because it was the first time I met the Queen of the Netherlands, Queen Beatrice. Is quite the knowledgeable person on smart city technologies. And there were booths set up all over, and we were looking at things cities were doing to capture data and then to employ that data. And it was just a really exciting proposition. And I was bound and determined to do everything I could to help make Austin a kind of a smart city leader in the world. It was just inspiring. And then right after that, we were invited to compete for a smart city competition that Secretary Fox, the transportation secretary under President Obama, had created. And I felt for sure we were just a shoo-in to win that competition. We were one of the finalists. Our whole community participated in the effort, and we didn't win. Columbus won. And I'm not sure we were even close. But the lesson that we learned from that, I think, was incredibly important. This would have been maybe 2016, that year later, is we pointed to every shiny new technology and we said, isn't this cool? And this is how we're going to use that technology here. Isn't this technology cool? We use this technology. The winning and ranking cities were ones that approached it very differently than we did. Those are cities that started with, this is a problem we've been unable to solve for the last 30 years. And every person runs and says, I'm going to solve that problem. And they do their years in office and they leave and they say, well, I tried, but I couldn't get it done.
Right.
We're going to find the technology that's going to help us actually solve it. And that's the exercise that they went through. And I think you end up in different places depending on how you do that. So my definition of smart city changed in 2015 and 2016 in terms of where you start. And are you focusing first on the challenge or problem that you want to solve and then bending the technologies to your challenge, as opposed to trying to make your challenges fit within the technologies. We started doing that really big time as a city, focusing on some of our safety issues at intersections, focusing on our climate change responsibilities, recognizing that once we did the work with Austin Energy, transportation is where we have our greatest responsibility. So doing things as we have done in the city to advance the infrastructure, bringing public mass transit to the city. The electric car adoption rate is twice the national average in Austin, in part because of how we've integrated charging stations and that responsibility, the metering that the Austin Energy is doing, soon to roll out to everybody in their service area, so that everybody has real-time ability to control their environments and to save themselves money. And then to use AI as a way to make sure that we're moving most efficiently. So I'm real proud of what we have done in that regard. I spent a lot of the public time over the last couple of years dealing with homelessness. And quite frankly, homelessness was not on my radar really when I ran in 2015. It wasn't on anybody's radar. I'm not sure it was on too many people's radar when I picked up the issue and said, no, this one's actually really important in 2016. But I'll tell you, if you look at some of the cities that are further down the road than us, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, if they could fix one thing in their city, if they could identify one thing in their city that is most disruptive to the overall quality of life and their advancement and trajectory, they would right now tell you it's homelessness. And then 8 years ago, they would never have identified that either. So it became apparent to me that in part because nobody was actually recognizing this was our big Achilles heel, we needed to surface that issue earlier than it would on its own. Because if you wait, then it's too big to solve. So we spent a lot of time on that, but I'm proud of the fact that if we had 9 years ago, we had a list of objective criteria, ways we're going to evaluate the city over an 8-year period of time: job growth, unemployment rate, gross product increases,
Right.
growth. Otherwise, on virtually every one of those, this led the country over that 8-year period of time. And I think the city is just really well positioned. You see that when we're the last to go into the economic hardships, the first to come out, and we're a victim of our own success. Everybody wants to be here. So affordability and increasing housing supply and doing that in a smart way is really the challenge going forward.
Yeah, Steve, one of the most interesting things that I've heard in the last 20 years is the following. Andreas and I were in Killeen, Texas, a wonderful city where I was stationed at one time after coming from Vietnam. And we're meeting with the city people, and the city manager said, well, Dr. Butler, we are now North Austin. Well, I found that very, very interesting because I was a member of ARA, Austin Area Research Organization, for 21 to 22 years. And when we first started to think of Austin as a regional hub and spoke, where we reached out to other cities, whether it was Round Rock, whether it was San Marcos, whether it was Pflugerville, we got a lot of pushback in the sense that, no, we are Pflugerville and we do not want to be identified with Austin. Well, me coming from the North Shore of New Orleans and growing up there, I understood that process. I am from Franklinton. I am not from New Orleans. I'm not, I am from Covington. I am not from New Orleans. So what I've seen in the last number of years is the regionalization that we talked about in the early days. And remember, we don't have suburbs in the South. We have small towns. Small towns that's been around since the 1820s and 1830s. So Bernadine Mott, a good friend of mine, her great grandparents started Pflugerville, right? And so Steve, when you think about all the success we've had, and we're going all the way, of course, Silicon Valley is now, 5 or 6 cities. But look what San Marcos has done. Look what Pflugerville has done. And look what Round Rock has done. And we have moved from a city where people were concerned to all of a sudden, we have a dynamic economic kind of region. So I looked at Andreas when the city manager said, we are now North Austin. I wanted to go under the table because I didn't know what he was talking about. And then he said the following. You want to what he talked about, the busing that he talked about, Andre? What did he say? He said what?
Well, that in an interesting way, what's happening in Silicon Valley is happening here, and you probably know this really well, Mayor. That Tesla is busing people from Killeen to go to the Gigafactory to work every day, and from San Antonio, right?
So we were there to look at Killeen, in the smart city concept. We drove through the downtown where I used to go through when I was a soldier. And it looked like Austin in the 1970s. And I was just wondering, Steve, how do you think about, what were your experience in the regional part of Austin? I mean, the regionalization and dealing with other cities. I know that they wanted the expressways, but not necessarily, they wanted to own their own identity. How did you deal with that? Because we really dealt with an Arrow. And for people listening, Arrow is an organization of people from those different places. So we have people from Lake Travis, we have people from Round Rock, we have people from Pflugerville, from San Marcos, and other small towns around Austin. And these would be elected officials. There'd be 5 people, and 5 men and 5 women, and et cetera. So Steve, did you run into that? How did you talk to Pflugerville? And we might go as far as Columbus, Columbus, Texas in the future.
I think you're right. I mean, there's not a challenge we have that is an Austin challenge. Virtually every challenge we have is a regional challenge. Affordability is not an Austin issue. Water, not a, these are all regional challenges. Austin did not do well regionally historically. Austin's values and the culture in this city were different than the values and cultures of many of the small towns that surrounded us.
Mhm.
Austin was real good back then at offering support and help or participation with these small towns around Austin, but only so long as the small towns around Austin were willing to accept our values and implement our policies. And they weren't going to do that. Then we'll be Austin.
Mhm.
And then we just didn't do it well. When I came into Austin, I started reconvening the Central Texas mayors so that we would get together as a group and talk through issues and just get to know each other more. It's a hard thing to sustain because everybody's busy, of course, and unlike the metropolitan area in Denver, where their regional government forum actually has money that they can spend. This was a group of leaders that were making those independent decisions, but it helped a lot. And
Mhm.
chance to be with mayors in all of the surrounding cities over the course of the 8 years, and certainly when I was chairing CAMPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization in this region, CAMPO. To be with all the mayors. And I was real proud. One of the big sticking points was the environmental standards that the city of Austin had, or an anathema to a lot of the small cities around us that didn't share the concern and saw the policies that ensued as being something that would not help them on their path. But in 2017-ish, we got together with virtually all of those jurisdictions at the south and west, and actually combined together to go to the state regulatory agency with a proposed rule change that we had come up with together. And then to come up with something like that was regional, especially as concerns an environmental matter, would have been unheard of the preceding 10, 15 years. But I think you're right. And I think what we're seeing now is that a lot of the challenges that Austin used to face that the cities around us were not facing are now challenges that we all face together.
Mhm.
Austin is not going to solve its homelessness challenge now without also addressing homelessness in the region because people can move back and forth. Affordability issues in our city limits of Austin are driving increased values in all the surrounding cities. Everything that we have, one of us, scratches our nose and the other one sneezes. We're tied together. And I think you're absolutely right. We have to be, and then will by necessity become a lot more regionally attuned and interactive and cooperative.
I'm curious.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andre.
Right. And I'm curious, Steve, as a mayor in your journey, as a citizen, as a private citizen, every day walking the streets, going to work or not, or going to a movie and so on. When you look at Austin, I see Austin, I moved here in 2000 as a conglomeration of multiple cliques of different, drivers and aspirations and desires. You got the music guys, you got the high-tech people, you got the government people, you got the students, you got the manufacturing guys, you got the the sort of industrial-based guys from that. You got all kinds of different, kind of universes. So as you were in charge, and obviously, you guys get to hear everything first because you're running the show. But how will you maintain, what do you used to do? I'm curious, to maintain in touch with some of these many cliques. I mean, will you go to the, Sunday coffee at this place and an afternoon sandwich at that place? Or how does Steve Adler keep in touch and listening to sort of Ella Churchill? What does the people say? Kind of thing.
Well, we still have all of those cliques. It's people in this city are active socially and politically, civically. So there's a well-organized and committed and devoted group on both sides of most every issue in this city. I look back on my time, and I probably could have done a better job of balancing kind of work and business, home life but Diane and I, we waited until our girls were gone, and then we kind of devoted ourselves to this. And fortunately, she's a real partner, and we did, most all this stuff together. But I used to have breakfast once a week in my home with a different one of those cliques, for donuts and coffee and just to make myself real accessible. I would go to as many evening things as I could. Saturdays and Sundays, I recognized, were the days that a lot of these organizations could get together. That's what I did a lot of Saturdays and Sundays, to, making yourself available, making sure you have a staff that understands its job is to make itself available. Be really careful to make sure that it is equally available to everybody, not just a favored few. But I think just making yourself available to people through otherwise.
Quick last question, Johnny. Quick last question on this vein. Steve, how hard is it to maintain a balance between the growth of the city at the speed that it needs to grow, and sort of keeping an eye on the culture? And I'm not so sure that that's the right question to ask, but there is a tug of war, right? I mean, Austin, is growing so fast, is doing so well. You got the MLS team into town. I mean, there is so many things, but at the same time, there's so many. So how do you keep that balance? Or what was it that because I have to tell you, I'm really proud of this city. I've been here. I'm really proud of the job that you've done. I think, there is no perfection, right? It's a journey, it never ends. And I'm sure there's a million things that you could have done better, or that you ran out of time to do. And we can talk about some of those, but how do you maintain that balance, that tug of war of, sort of keeping the family together? How does that work as a mayor? Because I imagine everybody calls you.
Well, it is hard, and certainly there's a lot of pressure on that. And I think that, when I would go to sleep at night, if there was any thought that I'd have that would be troublesome as I would fall asleep, it's recognizing that, we're kind of the cool city, we're the cool place, but there have been a lot of other cool cities that have come and gone before us, cities that used to have been the cool place. Best as I can tell, what all those cities have in common is they have a music museum downtown instead of actual music downtown. You probably need them both. But I think that what you're talking about is something that we talked about in Austin in the 80s, and in the 90s, and in the 2000s. It's a constant conversation because people understand that what we have here is magical and needs to be protected. We're about to have another debate on the future of Zilker Park, and it seems to me that we have sides lining up that are reminiscent of where I saw these same people 20 years ago. And so we'll do it again. I think what we have to be most concerned about is not those battles, because those battles help define who we are, but that we lose the people that wage the battle. And if we lose one side or another, if we lose the people, then the battles won't take place. Then we'll all be thinking the same way, on the same line, because those other voices won't be there. So it's our job though it makes life uncomfortable and it is disruptive and it's messy and it's awkward and it's tiresome. Our job is to preserve that very thing, which
Mhm,
people, which is why I said affordability, I thought was our key issue. But
mhm.
to figure out how to maintain the diversity that creates the friction that drives innovation and quality of life in our city.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the cliques I want you to get more involved in is the golfing clique. Now, I had you out as a guest at the Austin Golf Club, and you hadn't played golf, you're a Princeton guy. I know there's a golf course right at Princeton now. And I said, well, I'm going to wipe this guy off the earth. He gets up there and knocks it right down the middle. Then he gets up there and he knocks it on the green. And he said, well, I haven't played golf in so many years because I was a mayor. And Tim said to me, well, you better play because he's going to beat your butt if you don't play. Well, so having said that, one of the great things about Austin since I've been here that people don't talk about is the golfing community from Marge Williams. And now, of course, the Save Muni situation. I just think that, Muni is leased to the city by the University of Texas at Austin. And of course, our Board of Regents, I was a professor at UT for 48 years. They've got to maximize all of the things that they have. And Muni is a great place. It's like Zephyr Park, where golfers have been meeting for years and years and years. What's your take on the Save Muni, whether it's myself or Ben Crenshaw, Scotty Sales, others, Charlie Crenshaw, that have talked about how significant that golf course is to the community of Austin?
Well, there's no question about that. Golf course is significant to a large group in our city, and you pointed it out. By way of bias, I enjoy playing golf. I like being outside. I like being away from my phone, and it's a sport that where you do that in a lot of really pretty places. I think that the group that is supporting and trying to preserve Muni is an incredibly devoted and dedicated organization. And I think that they're making themselves well known, and they are well known advocates for that. The city has to make some choices. When I was mayor, there was the question about if we had a lot of money where we could say just buy the golf course, would we want to buy that golf course, or would we want to spend those same dollars on districts in the Northeast where there are insufficient park areas if you're having to choose between priorities? And our council was not clear on how it would decide that issue if it had to confront it. I had a lot of conversations with the 3 University of Texas presidents when they served while I was mayor, and made the argument that the relationship between the university and the city needs to move away from a transactional relationship. We should be supporting the university and all the things the university wants to do because it's the university, because it's a big part of who we are in this city and our brand and our quality of life. Similarly, one of our biggest residents is the University of Texas, and they should be helping the city just because they're participants in this city. There ought to be a lot more interaction between city staff and the faculty at the University of Texas, which would be a huge resource for knowledge within the city, and the city could be a huge whiteboard and testing ground for the university professors, and we ought to open up for that. We can't solve homelessness challenge without the University of Texas participating. Certainly we can't do the housing There are 50,000 kids there, and a lot of them are living off campus. If we worked with the university to help find dormitories or other kind of university appropriate housing, we could turn up a significant part of the available housing that the city otherwise needs. We're joined at the hip. And I think that the discussion of muni needs to be held in that context. That land is a piece of land that, yes, I recognize is held by the University of Texas, and its mission is to support the students at the university. And I think that's real important, and helping to make sure that the city works and it's an attractive place for faculty members, new faculty members, and students is a big part of that. So my hope is that, and I think that the president of the university now understands that. And as you point out, obviously there are fiduciary duties and there's value in that land, but there's all different kinds of value in that land. I know everybody is at the table continuing to try to find a resolution to that, and I believe that there will be one. Now that the council is moving away from where councils had been deadlocked in the past, my council, over kind of some urban planning issues, I think that's going to open up new possibilities to be part of the negotiations with the University of Texas. But it would be more than just shade. Anchorage in West Austin.
Yeah.
It looks like Central Park. Whatever
Yes,
housing.
I agree. Like you said, there's value there for everyone. I like that.
Yeah. Steve, when you think about, I'm looking at the time here, we don't got much left, but we're gonna get to the core of a lot of the things that we talk about, digital transformations. When you think about the smart city of the future, you probably, heard all the pitches and figured out, a lot of those things we cannot afford and what have you. When you think about, smart street lights, smart parking, smart traffic, digital signage, autonomous vehicles, mass transit, the rail to the airport and downtown and North Austin. I mean, when you think about all those things, what strikes you as the most interesting challenge of making all those decisions? Is it just pure basic politics and lobbying? Is it how do you compare an apple to an orange? Is it what's affordable and what's not? Clearly technology is a piece of Austin, is an enabling platform for Austin and everything we go forward. How do you see that, managing that, ongoing growth of technology being everywhere?
Well, Austin has built its brand here over the last 30, 40 years on technology. And that's not only the development of the technologies, but the devising of the applications for the technologies. And it attracts a lot of people to this city. So I think that is core to who we are. I got asked every year now at South by, which is what is 7th year or something like that, to talk about how South by has changed over time. My first reaction to that question is that for me, in a lot of ways, it hasn't changed. 37 years ago, South by recognized we had these phenomenal artists in town making music, and we had this great talent base. They were real successful here locally, but they weren't known. They needed help getting introduced to the producers and radio stations nationally. And I think South by is the same thing now, except the artists aren't musicians. They're tech entrepreneurs, and they're trying to meet the venture capital and the users of the technologies. So I think technology is kind of core to who we are. So I think we continue to push and find the applications, but beginning with our challenges. You know, we have affordability challenges. We need to see how technology is going to work. We have too many people driving alone in their cars to downtown. We have to change that intermodal split. We still, despite all the conservation efforts we do, and we're doing great, there's so much more we can be doing. So the metering and the smart metering, we need to take advantage of the fact that we own our own power company. Take advantage of the fact that we can do bonding to build out transportation and public transit infrastructure, things that we're doing in the city, because I think it's going to be our future. I think we are integrally tied to that, but I think that's really exciting, because I think that some of the intractable problems and challenges that cities have not been able to solve over the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years are going to be challenges that we can solve in this city if we're just really smart about it.
So one last question from me. When you see the skyline of Austin before Adler and after Adler, is a major change in the skyline. And I predicted a long time ago when I was at Austin Energy, 6 months into the job in 2003, that there would be 6 million people in Austin, like there are 6 million people in LA. Can you envision that city?
Yeah, if you look at the last 150 years, there's no way around it. We need to plan and make sure that we're ready for that. There's a lot of area around Austin. And what John was talking about earlier, I mean, those are city centers that'll be integrated. You know, John was talking about getting greater interaction and relationships with Round Rock and Buda and Bastrop and Cedar Park. But the next major metroplex that the demographers predict will exist in our country is Austin, San Antonio, connected by I-35. We need a transit connection. Those two cities, these two cities as well. The skyline has changed a lot. I can't obviously take credit for some of that. Some of those buildings you see now were initiated before I became mayor, and there are probably 20, 25 buildings that have been initiated while I was mayor that you don't see yet, that when you're conducting this interview in a few years with the subsequent mayors, you're going to be talking about my buildings that I didn't see.
Right. Absolutely. So Johnny, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I like the music, and I was never discovered, although I did play at the Mina Cat as a musician, and I did go out to Willie's and play with that, because musically his records, a lot of Willie Nelson's records were produced by my brother's roommate at his fraternity house at Indiana University, Booker T. Jones, who had a group called Booker T and the MGs. So Booker T would always ask me, "Why aren't you performing?" I said, "Well, you know, I never got discovered in Austin, but I'm working on it." But no, man, it's been good. It's been good, and thanks for joining us. And I think that you have lots of lessons, and I really encourage you to in your classes to encourage the importance of growth and market economies in your classes, and let everybody know that we determine our future, how we envision our future. And one of the things that you said we haven't talked about was that at one time Detroit was the Austin. When I was a kid, Detroit was the Austin. And now Detroit cannot pay its bills. So it is a continuous movement in time of doing great things to make sure that the city and jobs are maintained, so we won't become like as you said, a once great city.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that our years continue to be the best years, continue to be ahead. Now, Steve, what's in front of you in the next 6 months? Doing some traveling, and you're gonna teaching some, and what's in store? I mean, maybe you got season tickets for the MLS team, and tell us a little bit about what's next for Steve.
Well, I'll be teaching in the fall at St. Ed's, getting ready to teach the Executive Master's Program at LBJ School, obviously working on the book. I'm a regular out at Austin FC, it's hard to believe how controversial that was, and it only passed by 2 votes at like 3:30 in the morning. Anybody leave? I knew I had the votes to get it passed, so we weren't gonna adjourn until we took that vote, lest the votes changed on the council. But I do that, and I love this city, so I'm not going anywhere. I do have the same investments politically that I had for the last 20-30 years, so I'm sure I'll be involved one way or another to help support the kind of change that I think we need in the state. But time with my family. We now have four grandbabies, and they're just a hoot. And I've promised myself and Diane and their parents that I'd be around a lot. And I want to make sure that happens.
There you go. There you go. Well, I appreciate you for being with us, and we'll put this up in our YouTube channel and our website and send you a link. And let's ask our John Sibley Butler for some good live music.
Well, I know it's kind of late. I hope I didn't wake you, but what I got to say can't wait. I know you understand. Every time I try to tell you, the words just came out wrong. So I'll have to say I love you in a song.
Woo! Thank you, Johnny.
You're welcome.
It's always a pleasure, Steve. Always a pleasure.